So we have a little bit
I'm
of
good.
news.
Well, and by the way, I mean, my phone was just like, meh, 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 meh. So yeah, John Bolton was indicted. Now, again, you and I said last week in the great ham sandwich line that a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich, but this looks a little more troubling than a ham sandwich. So, former National Security Advisor, former scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, former ambassador to the United Nations, former Assistant Secretary of State, former Undersecretary of State, John Bolton was indicted, and looks not great for him.
Yeah, I mean, you give that long introduction of all the formers because he should know better. And just as the news was breaking, there are all these clips of him being like, "If I did that, I'd be in an orange jumpsuit." I mean, look, there are plenty of people that someone said to me, some were obviously like everyone's texting or going blah blah blah, and someone said, "I'm not saying he deserved it, but," and I said
No.
he deserved it any more than anyone else who's done this has deserved it. Not everybody that deserves it gets prosecuted.
No, look, we talked about this. We talked about this last time when I said, look, I know people who brought home classified information and got a slap on the wrist. But I will say this as somebody who had a security clearance and who knows John Bolton. A, John Bolton should know better, and B, never in a million years would I have taken a classified document, whether it was in the safe in my office or in our offices or in a secure facility, and put it in a folder and taken it home. Nor, by the way, would I ever have taken classified information and rephrased it and represented it. Now, look, I want to say it's really important for people to understand that classification is completely loose. Oh my goodness, I haven't seen Gina Abercrombie Winstanley's name in a really long time. Hi, Gina.
Hi, Gina.
Uh, there's a lot of overclassification. There's stuff that's classified that shouldn't be. But that being said, that's not what we're talking about. And folks, I read to Elise the Washington Post story, which really tried to distinguish between the Trump prosecutions of Letitia James
These political prosecutions,
and
payback, Comey, Adam Schiff, that kind of stuff. Yeah, this is different.
How about you're asking, is the onus on the prosecution? For sure. And, look, in America, thank God, people are innocent until proven guilty. And that goes for people you like and people you can't stand. But you do need to be careful. And I will say that, look, when you spend a lot of time in government, especially in foreign policy, where you see a lot of classified material, there's no question that you talk a lot about things that are classified, right? Because that's what you have to talk about. Are the Chinese exporting things they shouldn't be exporting to states that sponsor terrorism? I don't know, like Iran. Of course they are, right? And so people who have a security clearance know that that's happening. They know what's going on. And on top of everything else, they need to talk about it. They need to talk about it with their colleagues. They need to talk about it with outsiders, and sometimes they need to talk about it with foreigners as well. So it encourages a certain loosey-goosey attitude towards classified material. That being said, this isn't about going and warning the Chinese that they shouldn't be selling stuff to bad guys.
This is about him squirreling away information for his book. Okay.
Right.
He wrote every day at the end of the day, he would go in. This is how my understanding following everything of how it went. And I can't see anybody's questions. For some reason, I can't see who's on. So it's all on you.
That's all on
Dan.
me.
Okay. So basically, he would take paper from the printer that was like extraneous paper, that was like scrap paper. He'd go into a meeting, he'd write some notes, and then he'd like take those home. And basically, he was squirreling information away for his book. And that book was not very favorable to Donald Trump, by the way. I was saying earlier before we went on, if he was the national security advisor, kind of like McMaster, I mean, left and, didn't say anything.
H.R. McMaster is an officer and a gentleman.
Right. But I mean, he was one of the biggest critics of Trump. The book was very unfavorable to Trump, very
Called him an
favorable to
idiot.
very favorable to John Bolton. And so in a sense, and I said this to you also, if you're going to go against Trump, you need to be squeaky clean. And, John Bolton, this doesn't look good for him. He kind of scanned these notes and emailed them back to his family. And also, how did people find out about it? Apparently, this is on AOL, and Iranians found. I always wondered why he had this AOL account that you're emailing,
which we
him
all
on.
have, right? We all have that email address.
The Iranians found classified information on his AOL account,
Right.
national security
And
information, and
of course,
apparently a foreign government notified the U.S. We don't know who it is. It must be Israel or one of the Middle Eastern, one of the Gulf nations. But, this is the exact example of what you're worried about when
right.
you use classified information.
Right. No, listen, and again, I get it. There are different standards for different people. On the other hand, you have a special onus. You are the national security advisor. You're also an outstandingly smart lawyer, right? And that is the thing. You need to be careful.
Yeah.
And by the way, when John was at AEI, we were constantly under assault by the Iranians, by the Chinese, by the Russians. So the idea that you would stick with AOL for this kind of shifty stuff is just crazy. Anyway, look, yeah, it's going to suck for him, and I get it. And I'm sorry, just because he's a human being, but yeah, these things happen. Anyway, that's not the only news that today is.
It's a cautionary tale.
It is a cautionary tale.
Yes. President Trump spoke with Putin today, and now they're meeting again. Very coincidentally, after President Trump is meeting with Zelensky, tomorrow? And is talking about sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Now that he's done with the Middle East, he's moving on to solve the Ukraine, which has been the hardest. And now, all of a sudden, Putin calls up and says, let's talk.
Well, so it wasn't, first of all, it wasn't all of a sudden that Putin called and said, let's talk. So my podcast co-host and colleague, Mark Thiessen, had a great piece in the Washington Post today.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Talking about what were good targets for the Ukrainians using American weaponry into Ukraine. And I think between that, the Tomahawks and everything else, I think Putin rightly thought, "Oh, time for another call to the Donald." The problem with Trump is, with this Ukraine stuff, I get it. You and I have talked about this. We know that what he wants is to end the war. The problem is he won't stop giving chances to Vladimir Putin, and this is. It's again, it's his susceptibility to flattery. It's his susceptibility to being cajoled. It's his susceptibility to the idea that he is going to be the persuader. Look, he was the persuader with Hamas, and he got this incredible, end to the war in Gaza. And you gave him credit. I gave him credit. Lots of people gave him credit. And I think the problem is also, again, that went to his head, because there is no freaking way that Putin wants to end this war on any terms. I will say this. He's meeting with Zelensky tomorrow, and I'm hopeful that that will be a good meeting. And
then U.S. and Russian officials are meeting before.
But not right. But there's a walk up. So the State Department has folks meeting. So it's not that Trump is getting on the bus and going and meeting Vlad. Right. There's meetings in Budapest. And hopefully they are to gauge whether Putin is actually serious or he wants to waste the president of the United States.
I go back to what you said. I think that Trump will think I can persuade him. And maybe he has no intention of giving the Tomahawks, because he thought that was like a psych ops that, I'll threaten and then I'll be able to persuade him. I don't think he really wants to further arm Ukraine. I think he thinks he can, you know.
I don't agree about that. He does. I think he's pretty serious about arming Ukraine, because he recognizes there's been. I mean, it's not just about arming Ukraine. It's about a good partnership with Ukraine, and some drone capabilities that the Ukrainians are going to share with us, which will be great. So it's not sort of a goodness of my heart type of thing. So I'm more sanguine about his support for Ukraine. The problem the problem is the problem, as we both said. I mean, there's nothing new to say here, which is he is endlessly gullible when it comes to a call from Vlad. I told you I absolutely adore this account on Instagram called they're called Puppet Regime, but I think their Instagram name is The Real Puppet Regime. But it is
Is that
as if
Ian Bremmer?
Oh, no, 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 no. It's fabulous. Really, guys, go and have a look at it. You will laugh out loud. And this is not some middle-aged lady sending her kids reels, which I'm sensitive about. Um, I just sent Elise one too. Oh
That
my
was
God.
funny.
It was funny, I know. Well, anyway, but it really does capture the vibe between Putin and Trump, and also a whole variety of other leaders, including Xi Jinping. It's hilarious. Go and look at it. I'll try and send you a link for the show notes.
We'll find it. Okay, so this morning I had a great talk. If you missed it, we'll also send it along with Elliot Abrams on Venezuela. Elliot is currently at the Council on Foreign Relations, dealing primarily with the Middle East. He was Deputy National Security Advisor to the George W. Bush administration, dealing with the Middle East. But in the first Trump administration, he was the U.S. envoy to Venezuela. And
Not
so
not two, but four.
for Venezuela. Sorry.
Mhm.
So we talked about these recent developments. As we know, over the last few months, Trump has been launching strikes against Venezuelan boats that he claims were drug smuggling boats. But this is ramping up this U.S. approach towards Venezuela. Now, he said yesterday that he's authorized covert operations by the CIA in Venezuela. We had some former
There was
CIA
a leak
analyst.
about that. Yeah.
Well, but, I mean, you don't confirm that you've launched covert operations. It's kind of weird. Anyway, apparently there is a covert finding. We don't know what the covert finding is, but talking with Elliot, his presumption as that, yes, this is about drugs and, the drugs that are coming, but we know that most of the fentanyl comes from Mexico. It is about drugs, but it's more about regime change and getting rid of Maduro.
Donald
And
Trump, neocon.
yes, and more of this kind of looking at the region, looking at what a democratic Venezuela could do, not just for the hemisphere, but for his own legacy. And
What was
bumped up
Elliot's take on
by
this? By the way, you saw the news, right? That the admiral in charge of our operations in the Caribbean just stepped down. He
no.
was so just happened about half an hour ago. Uncomfortable with what my colleagues suggested were extrajudicial killings.
Well, there is a lot of questions about who these targets were. The administration has, which a lot of things that they're doing right now, they're, making very bold claims with publicizing zero evidence of, these targets or who they are. And, there even Republican lawmakers are questioning the legality of it. So it's not just
What did
Democrats.
Elliot say?
Elliot said he said he has no reason to believe that they're not drug smugglers. But what he said is this is an effort to have the dominoes fall in the hemisphere. If you get rid of Venezuela, who's giving how many, billions of dollars in oil to Cuba, if Maduro falls, and then they stop supporting Cuba, then Cuba could fall, and then possibly Nicaragua could fall, and then this whole domino of anti-American regimes in the hemisphere would be gone. You have a democratic hemisphere that's friendly to the US, and this is very good for Donald Trump, for the Americans, for his legacy. And he says that
Also
he
for
thinks that,
us. I mean,
right,
it's a good thing. Maduro's a
it's,
bad man. So
and
this is but
he said,
Gina just asked, which I really think is an interesting question. Is this a push for Marco Rubio? I
yes,
mean, yes, right? I think the answer to that is
look,
yes.
look, he said it's not just a push from Marco, who's been, where is Marco from?
Florida, the
So
free
it's
state of
not just
Florida.
Marco, but the great state of Florida is also where his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, is from,
Right.
and Rick Scott. And so there's a whole cabal of people that are pushing him. And who's losing? Rick Grinnell, the envoy, who was trying to negotiate this deal with Maduro for, oil, minerals, rich minerals, more of like a diplomatic solution. And basically, Rick was told, stand down. We're not negotiating with Maduro anymore. And now it seems as if the administration is working with the Democratic opposition in Venezuela.
The
And they
Nobel Peace
Nobel
Prize
Peace
winning.
Prize winner who dedicated um her award to Trump and has been calling for him to end this war by Maduro on her country. And it's interesting what Elliot said is that when he was the envoy for Venezuela, they wanted to get rid of Maduro, but usually when you have these regimes, the military will turn against whoever it is, the dictator.
Right. Right.
But in this case, they wouldn't.
Well,
And
I mean, they've taken over the economy.
right. So now, over the last few years, there's been more, um, you know, outreach to people in the military. He thinks a lot of what Trump is doing is psych ops because this could be just sending this message to Maduro and to those around him that Maduro is going to fall and you don't want to be like Bashar al-Assad and you don't want to be like Mubarak and you know what I mean? Jump ship now.
Right.
And the message is the U.S. can help you. The U.S. can help economically. The U.S. can help take your place among the democracies in the region.
Hmm.
And so it's reaching out to business people. And so trying to, put out the word that Maduro's days are numbered. And it's better to put their lot in with the opposition and with the U.S. It's very interesting.
So let me add a few factoids about Venezuela, which I think are really important. Obviously, all from the Danny Pletka prism of what I care about, which is not Latin America. The Venezuela has become one of the most important entrepôts, most important liaisons for the
Or,
Iranians,
hmm
right? For the
yeah,
Iranians and for Hezbollah.
hmm
A Venezuelan passport has become one of the most important peace tools in the hands of terrorists because the Interior Ministry in the Maduro government has been handing off passports to Islamist extremists of the Sunni and Shia variety. There years ago, and this I'm operating on pretty old knowledge on this one. Years ago, we had suspicions that the Iranians were actually involved in some uranium mining in Venezuela, which we all know what that's about. And then, in addition, of course, how are Maduro and company making money? Venezuela was the richest country in South America. It has vast stores of gas, oil, excuse me, and the regime has a deal with the Chinese to sell it at a cut rate, what they do is they sell it at a cut rate to the Chinese, but they take the skim off the top. And that's how I mean, if you're a dictator, that is how you keep your people happy, right? You stop them from overthrowing you by making sure that you share the spoils with them. So these are the spoils that they've been sharing. None of this is in our interest. And the Biden administration very sneakily, it's not covert, it's very sneakily
Mhm.
allowed allowed energy investments in Venezuela and allowed them to sell oil to the United States because they wanted to keep the price down, right? It was the same as what they were doing with the Iranians
Well,
because
they're
they wanted to
still
keep the
doing
price
it,
down.
aren't they?
So actually, that's a really good question, and I
I
need to
think they
ask
are.
Stephen. I Frigatoni. I know the answer to this, mm, but it's not in my brain right now, which is the key point. So I don't know whether this is still
Frigatoni, I
going
really like
on.
that.
Yeah, I know. Well, yes. It was better than a swear word, but although I like those too.
I'm gonna
Uh,
borrow it.
Please serve yourself. But I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that in the Biden administration, they changed the general license for Venezuela and allowed special licenses that continued to enable the export of Venezuelan oil to the United States, and that was all with a view to the election. So all
So
sort
my
of naughty,
question
naughty.
is, and Elliot was saying, like, again, it's about the cartels, but he says he doesn't even think this Trent Agua is really the, main cartel that's working um, with Maduro. He thinks it's the other cartel whose name is escaping me. But he thinks it's my question is, what does this have to do with this massive immigration? Trenta Agua is invading the United States, and that's what all these immigration raids are. And he actually was kind of negative on what they've done with a lot of these Venezuelan immigrants. Venezuela is having one of the biggest, he said Venezuela is actually the biggest refugee country that's sending the most refugees overseas. And, the US canceled TPS for 600,000 refugees, temporary protected status. And now Venezuelans are all part of Trenta Agua. And this is like, now we're being invaded by Venezuelan migrants. And this is part of the crackdown on crime. I don't really, that connection to me seems a little dubious. Every
There were famous
landscape
stories.
Every landscaper or guy who's working at Home Depot is not a Venezuelan cartel official or card-carrying member of the cartel, in my opinion.
Right. Agua certainly is a dangerous
Bad.
gang.
Yes, bad.
Right. They are certainly operating in the United States. They
Yes.
are certainly taking over niches of communities. Um, the problem is, yeah, you're right. Illegal aliens and illegal criminal aliens are being conflated by the Trump administration. Um, I guess my view is they're all illegal aliens.
Okay,
Uh,
but
but
they said they were going to go after the worst of the worst,
Well,
and
I think they're going
they're
after
going after everybody, all
the
brown people
low-hanging
is
fruit.
basically what they're okay. Yeah, they're
No,
going
that
after the low end.
bullshit. Come on.
I
Don't go there.
Oh, come on. Standing outside of a Home Depot? Give me a break.
You know what? Being an illegal alien is being an illegal alien, and getting to hide behind your color is bullshit, okay? If you
All
break the
I'm
law and
saying,
don't come into
okay,
the country,
that's fine. Then say we're going to find every illegal alien and hunt them down and get rid of them. But don't say we're going after the worst of the worst. And the worst of the worst are not even the ones being caught.
I'll let Christy Nome know that you want them only to go after the certain brown ones
Go
that you
after the
think
certain
really
brown
deserve it.
ones first and then go after all of them. Okay. That's all I'm saying. Well, I think I'm a little bit, I think that that immigrants, yes, I wish there was more of a um, system for people to migrate here better legally and to deal with some of the illegal immigrants and the migrants in this country. But I think immigrants to this country are in a lot of ways helping it run. And I just have a different opinion about it than you. I still love you.
I still love you too.
See, this is how we do it. This is how we do it, people. Okay, let's move
Grace,
on.
I have a lot of heart, and also I waited in line. Sorry, I had a
She
green card
did.
for more than
She
20
did.
years, and my parents waited in line, right? And their ancestors didn't get into this country, and they didn't come here illegally. I have plenty of heart,
She
right?
does have plenty of heart.
Thank you. Anyway,
Um,
we have one last thing we want to talk about.
well, we want to talk about oh no, we talked about Gaza on Tuesday. Just quickly, I think it's for all those people, and I think we said it the other day, that we're so concerned about the Palestinians. Well, now Hamas is back in charge and killing Palestinians who they feel were collaborating with Israel or against them. And so, what are you only care about Hamas? Where are the protesters against,
Did you see
what
Mamdani's
Hamas
interview?
is doing? Yeah, I
Did you
did.
see Mamdani's interview?
Yeah.
He thinks Netanyahu needs to be arrested, but has no opinion about Hamas.
Or whether Hamas should lay down its arms.
What a treasure. Lucky
I
New
just
Yorkers.
look, I think again, just to put the finest point on it, and then we're gonna move on. Until you decide how you're gonna disarm Hamas, who's gonna run Gaza, who's gonna run this stabilization force, this peace deal is phase one. And I'm sorry, it's very short on details of what's going to happen next. And I really hope the administration stays engaged on this issue.
I do
I fear
too.
they won't.
Well, what I said, look, we had we recorded our podcast on this with our What the Hell podcast with Dan Senor on this today, and what I was saying to Mark afterwards was, look, the problem for me is the Times of Israel had a piece about the fact that, right, what was phase one? Phase one is you return all the living hostages and the dead hostages, and that Israel releases 250 prisoners inside Israeli prisoners and 1,750 from Gaza. And the Israelis, the living hostages come home. The Israelis release the guys, and only 4 of the dead,
More than
murdered
4.
hostages. No,
I'm
I
not
think it's
excusing. I'm not excusing Hamas. I think it's like 9 now, but it's not 28, and there are 28.
Mazal Tov. In any case, I must have missed the last 5, but
But
I
you know
believe
what?
you. But wait, let me finish. Elise,
U.S. officials are saying that they don't believe that they're not. I don't know if it's not in good faith or whatever. Do you think it's that they're hiding them, or they have no idea where they are, and they should have said that before they made this deal?
give me a fucking break,
I'm
okay?
just
This
asking.
is Well, so this is what I was about to say. This is Hamas, okay? They know where everybody is. They went and found everybody they wanted to kill very efficiently on Tuesday and Wednesday, didn't they? So
Mm.
that's number one. Number two, what I said to Mark, and that's what I was starting to say to you, is that what I remember from after Oslo in the 1990s is that the Palestinians that became the Palestinian Authority undertook certain obligations, including not to support terrorism, not to and not to try to and what's the word I'm missing now? Exhort terrorism. Not to try to
Incite?
incite. Thank you, incitement, and not to incite. And the State Department was required to report to Congress when, in fact, the PA engaged in this behavior. Right. So what did the State Department do when they started engaging in that behavior because the deal was more important to them? We have to protect the process. We have to protect the peace. We can't. They started to lie about
Sounds
what
like
it
maybe
was
they're
that
doing
these
that
guys
again
were
then.
doing. So that's what I worry about and it's only 3 days in. I don't want to besmirch the people
Worked hard on the deal.
who worked hard on this and who I think are really hoping to get this done in good faith. On the other hand, and I'm sure that there will be a problem in finding all of these guys. But the notion that you could only find, 10% of them, 5% of them, is ridiculous. And of course, that's not the only thing that Hamas isn't doing
Right.
that was concordant with the deal. So anyway, I just worry that about that. Then again, this is a different administration. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully, I'm just too pessimistic. Dan Senor used a great line, which I know you will appreciate, and he said he said his rabbi told him, and I'm sure lots of our listeners have heard this as well, but. Uh, Jews are always pessimists. No, Jews aren't always pessimists. Jews are sometimes optimists. What's a Jewish optimist? Things are terrible, and the Jewish optimist is right, but they could get worse.
That's good.
I
That's
feel
good.
like that pretty much colors my analysis of the
Let's go
Middle East.
2 more minutes. We just wanted to take a quick look. We're continuing on the shutdown, and we're not going to get into the shutdown, but a couple of things have become kind of interesting about some of the lawmakers that are just bucking their party. Let's start with Fetterman. Fetterman has said that he thinks that the shutdown is ridiculous, and he blames Democrats, and he wants Democrats to just, vote for the clean CR and then negotiate the health care. This is not the first time that they're upset about his softened approach to Trump and his criticism of the party, and now they're going to primary him.
And nasty Connor Lamb, right, an AOC type is really going after him. Look, Republicans do this too. You need, this. You need these people. Fetterman is a guy who really represents, I think, very well what Pennsylvania is, which is a lot of conservatives. But in the cities, a lot of Democrats, and the idea that he has that he deserves this kind of treatment is just gross. But hey, that's what's going to happen.
That's politics, and
let's see what
also
happens.
Marjorie Taylor
Green, your favorite.
Taylor Greene. I mean, I'm fascinated, but I mean, I think she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs sometimes. But I mean, she's most of the time, but she's been remarkably kind of principled on what she thinks that the Republicans should do, which is to vote for these healthcare subsidies. We do not don't agree with them on this issue, but we will digress and stay on Marjorie Taylor Greene. Publicly criticized Republicans for not having a plan to keep these subsidies. She signed a bipartisan resolution to force the DOJ to release Epstein files. Bernie Sanders called her a good Republican, praising her for represents her her constituents over her loyalty to Trump. And even Hakeem Jeffries said she has surprisingly enlightened few weeks on these issues. So it's just interesting. It's just interesting how people are criticized for doing what they think their constituents want, as opposed to sticking by the party line.
I don't think that's what she's doing. I think she's mad at Trump. And this is all about that.
For what?
For not supporting her for running for Senate. Which he didn't, because she'd lose. So I think this is just, we have the same conversation every damn time. This is just the circle where, you eventually go so far right that you end up on the far left. She's a moron. I don't think Fetterman is a moron. I think he's an odd guy. I let me be frank. But I think that his, look, for me, his support for Israel has been unbelievably principled, and I think he's been really tough on his party on these issues. of course, people should listen to their constituents, Chava, but you are not elected to be a sheep and stray where it is that your constituent tells you at any given moment. You are elected to represent your district, and then you will be voted on, and they will judge you at the next election. Marjorie Taylor Greene can't represent her constituents doing what she's doing now and doing what she was doing 6 months ago. So you got to decide if you respect her for representing her constituents that you agree with, or are you representing her constituents who you don't agree with.
It's a good point.
Well, and she got elected by a hair, so we'll see what happens next time. But yeah, anytime somebody says to me that a member of the other party has praised them for being
not a ringing endorsement
extraordinarily
for
reasonable.
reelection.
Bingo.
I think, and we've mentioned this before, and we're going to close it. But I do see you're going to see people from the far right and the far left kind of going so far that they do a semicircle and they're holding hands together soon.
Tucker Carlson, Bernie Sanders, and AOC, and what's that woman's name who I can't stand?
Lauren Boebert.
No, that's another one.
Laura Loomer.
No.
Elise Stefanik.
I love her.
You love her.
I love all women named Elise.
Okay.
Anyway, you guys don't care, but the bottom line is they all have the same policy. And
which is
anytime you see that, which is that they're rabid anti-Semites. And as far as I'm concerned, screw them. So with that,
Labott family motto.
We're not telling you what that is.
You have to be part of the Labott family.
Throw us off the air.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Ciao.